Hello, and welcome to today's Jewish Policy Center webinar. I am Shoshana Bryant, Senior Director of the JPC, and your host. And even though it's August, and even though it's hot and miserable and rotten, and even though our guest today is down there in Florida where they had a hurricane, I'm happy to see that there are a lot of you out there. And I think I know why. It's our guest, of course, but it's also Iran. It's also always about Iran. We are not going to answer the question, will Iran attack Israel or will Israel attack Iran? I don't think we have an answer, although it does appear that the US government has been talking intensely about de-escalation. And we're not going to offer advice to Israel, and we're not going to offer advice to President Biden, although we have some thoughts. We're going here for context. Iran needs context. We need to understand what motivates the Iranian government and how to deal with it in its context. And today's guest, Harold Rhode, is here to provide that. I know you've seen him with us before. We're happy to have him back. So we're going to go with a short JPC introduction, and then we're going to turn the floor over to Harold. The Jewish Policy Center was founded in 1985 to provide perspectives and analysis on foreign and domestic policies by scholars, academics, and commentators. You can find us on our website, jewishpolicycenter.org. You can sign up for our Insight articles. You can read our In Context column and see our magazine In Focus Quarterly. The summer issue of In Focus is up now. It is entitled Agenda America. That's jewishpolicycenter.org. The JPC supports a strong American defense capability, U.S.-Israel security cooperation, and missile defense. Right now, our most important job is to support the legitimacy and security of Israel against anyone who would deny them. We support the government of Israel and the IDF in their defense of the Israeli people and in bringing the perpetrators of October 7th to justice and making Hamas and its fellow travelers release the hostages. And, because that's not a big enough agenda, bringing an end to the malign influence of the mullahs of Iran for Israel's sake and to help bring about a broad regional peace. Our guest today, Harold Rhode, is a senior fellow at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs and a distinguished fellow at the Gatestone Institute. Actually, he's a distinguished fellow wherever he is, but the titles run differently. Harold holds a PhD in Ottoman history from Columbia University, specializing in the history of the Turkish, Arab, and Iranian people. He speaks Arabic, Turkish, Persian, French, and Hebrew, along with some Spanish and Italian. And he has studied in and traveled extensively. Quiet, Harold. I'm not done introducing you. Throughout the Islamic world, doing research in Egypt, Israel, Syria, Jordan, Iran, Afghanistan, Turkey, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan. He put all of that to good use in the Office of the Secretary of Defense for Net Assessment as an advisor on Islamic Affairs. And I'll skip the little story about the Iraqi Jewish Archive because Harold's getting nervous in his seat. Suffice it to say that Harold rescued the Iraqi Jewish Archive from Saddam Hussein's ministry, had it returned to the United States, had it restored, and it remains here today with us where it belongs. So I am very pleased to turn over the floor to Harold Rhode. We'll hear him first and send in your questions if you have them. Harold, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shoshana, and I'm embarrassed about all these things you said about me because in the end, we're all simple human beings and we have to remember that. Let me talk simply about Iran, why I'm able to. It's not just research. I went to university in Iran in a place called Mashhad, about 17 hours by road east of Tehran, almost close to the Afghan border where we escaped to. This was during the early and mid stages of the revolution. And we escaped to Afghanistan. There's nothing else we could do. We had to get out because there's a lot of instability and chaos. Now, during the time that I was there and through a lot of study, I'm really interested in understanding how other people look at the world. Why? In this case, all I was trying to do from the time I was little was to find a way that the Jews and Muslims could live in peace, like we used to live in the United States, everybody, when I grew up. I'm almost 75, so I remember it was okay when we were little. We didn't lock our doors. Different world. Now, the thing was, I was not only interested in history, but how to understand the Iranian mindset. And once you do that, and that's what I spent even at the Pentagon for 28 years. That's what I spent so much time trying to do and to explain it to our policymakers. Here's the thing. Now, I'm not asking anybody here to agree or disagree with me. I'm simply describing my experiences, and I've written on this galore on how they look at the world. Because if you're negotiating with somebody else or you're talking with somebody else, you have to understand not only their language, but the way they're thinking about things. Now, they, for example, don't have a concept of you split the differences. Because, and here is why. When you negotiate in Iran, only after you win. If you negotiate beforehand, it shows that you're weak and either don't have the ability or the will to do what is necessary to win. And when Iranians see that, they pounce, they strike. The same is true in the Arab world. Now, it's based on how they understand the concepts of honor and shame. And I don't care how we understand them. If you give in on anything, then people think that, which, like in negotiations here in the West, Shoshana, you and I, we're ancient friends. But let us assume that I hate you, God forbid, and you hate me. And we need to work together on something now. So we in the United States, we in the West, we sit down. I give a little, you give a little, Shoshana. We smile. Again, you're a man, if we're talking about Iran's story. But in America, you and I will shake hands, we'll hug each other, whatever. And we march on together. Now, how will the Iranians understand what I just described? Giving in is shameful. So if I gave in, that means I'm shamed. And shame means not what you think of yourself, but what others say about you. Look at him. Harold gave in. He's a weakling. And this is what Iran has to worry about right now. And that is, it is the laughingstock of the Muslim world. Why? Because, first of all, on April 14th, and I was in Jerusalem at the time, we had a sound and light show in the sky, meaning that the Iranians sent off all of these missiles, ballistic missiles, everything. And we watched it in the sky. I was kind of stupid being outside and looking at it. I should have been in a bomb shelter, but I'm at times, whatever, kind of dumb. Anyway, that's okay. What happens? We hear, look, that Israel was helped by the Jordanians, the Americans, who knows what else. That's true, but it was Israel who did the overwhelming amount of the job. Now, the Iron Dome has about a 90% success rate. In this case, it was over 99%. Why? First of all, there were 330 rockets, bombs, whatever they were, who came into Israeli space. Israel took care of it all. And with the help of others, but it was Israel who basically did most of the work, as I said. Now, that's number one. Iran looks stupid. And not only that, why? Because not only did they fail vis-a-vis the Jews, and that's how they see it, they don't talk, they in their mind, it's the dumb Jews, or excuse me, the too smart Jews who run the world. That's what they're thinking. The Shah thought that. I remember discussions when he was in power with foreigners about that. The Shah thought this. And these guys think about who are running it. They think about it in spades. Okay. Also, many of the weapons that they sent off, that Iran sent off, it launched towards Israel, blew up on the launching pads. This is shameful. Remember, shame means you're weak. Number one, what did Iran do in response after that? Nothing. That's number one. Number two, when Hezbollah is nothing more than an Iranian fifth column in Lebanon. They really, in the end, take their orders from Iran. Now, what happens when the Hezbollah sent off rockets, missiles, and murdered these children in a Jewish village in the Golan, in Israeli territory, Israel had to strike back. How did it strike back? And it took out in Lebanon. Everybody was saying back then, don't go into Beirut, God forbid. All these awful things are going to happen. Well, what Israel managed to do was take out Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah. Nasrallah's number 2 guy, Fuad Shukr. And who is this man? Number 1, he was head of the military forces in Hezbollah. In an exact, Israel didn't blow up those around it. It was a pinpoint hit, basically, which just, again, shows how great Israel's abilities are. This and what did everybody? They did nothing. Why? Because they were afraid of what Israel would do. And now we have the third thing that happened, which Israel has not taken responsibility for, and that is the Hania elimination, assassination, whatever you wish, in Tehran, and where it was in an IRGC, that is the military forces, which basically are the backbone of the regime, in their headquarters. That's where Hania was staying. And how it happened. Look, someone put on the net last night a minute-by-minute explanation. You can listen to it. Shoshana, I know I sent it to you. On how others, the Iranians say it's Israel. But now look at it from an Iranian point of view. This is shame after shame after shame. Now, the title of this article that you asked me to that I should really address what I wrote in JNS last week, which you thankfully, thank you, republished on your website as well. The thing was Iran. Look at it from the leadership's point of view. There, it's between a rock and the hard place. If he's got, what is its problem? Its bottom line is to stay in power, and the regime knows that the people overwhelmingly hate it. And just as I lived through the Shah being overthrown I was there in 1978. I wasn't there from the day the Shah left, but the whole country was in chaos. The moment that the people who saw that the Shah wouldn't do or couldn't do, it didn't matter what was necessary to put down the riots against them, the people began to revolt and yell, death to the Shah along with Khomeini. That's what public opinion means in the Middle East all over. It's that as long as they're afraid of the regime, they, that people, this whole idea of polling what people think, we have no way of what people really think. But in the Middle East, this is the equivalent of polling. You're in power, Shoshana. I'm afraid of you. And whatever you do, I'll be nice and sweet, even though I hate you because you're oppressing me. But the moment I see that you're weak, poor Shoshana. Now, when Israel did what it did on April 14th, it's protected itself against Iran, and Iran looked so stupid when, again, that I mentioned earlier, the bombing, or the attempt at launching everything against Israel, all its weapons, whatever. The Iranians went out in the street. They interpreted this as, I have signs, I have pictures of what they were writing on the walls, graffiti. It would say, Bizan, Bizan, strike, strike in Persian. Bizan Israel, Israel. And then, and Momirim, and we are going to go out into the streets. In other words, if you take out the regime, we're going to go out into the streets, and we are going to overthrow the regime, because we can't do it unless you bring it out. Now, the regime knows very well that the people hate it. And if it knows that, then its first thing I said between the rock and the hard place. Let's call that's the rock. It's like if they do something, if they show in any way weakness, then it means that the people will go out and rise up against them. And by the way, they have no idea. There's no concept of compassion, of being nice. and what they will do to their leaders, whom they loathe, is murder them and drag them out in the streets, their bodies pulled behind a truck or something like that type. And the regime knows this. Now, if they don't do something to Israel, then in response to show, oh, I'm somebody, I'm strong, and Israel's afraid of me. That's how they're thinking. If that is the case, they don't, that's one thing, they have to. But on the other hand, if they attack Israel, they will bring on an Israeli response. And believe me, the Iranians know very, very well how strong Israel is. So where does America fit in? And this is extremely important. The way America is looking at the world, this present administration, I would say overwhelmingly the State Department and other institutions, which, you know, you and I, Shoshana, over the years have had enormous knowledge, involvement with people of these types, let's say. Stability more than anything. We must be stable. So whatever happened 3 minutes ago, that's the American phrase, that's history. Whatever happened 3 minutes ago doesn't matter. What that means is, okay, the Iranians did these things, or Israel did these things, but let us stop everything. Let us put that all behind us. It's in the past. And let's now sit down and negotiate. Now, that means that nobody has won here. And if you negotiate, it means you don't have the guts to do what is necessary to win. You only negotiate after victory. That's when you talk. And then we Americans, we love signed agreements. Oh, he signed. You know what the signed agreement means in the Middle East? It's just one more tactic to get what I want to do, which is to destroy first the little state, Satan, and then the big state, Satan. And you and I may say, oh, come on, you're going to destroy the United States of America? Well, they understand war differently. Anything which advances their agenda. Read the Iranian constitution, live in the Middle East. I mean, I am a religious Jew today, and I certainly wasn't when I lived in the Middle East. And I once could pray better, at first as a Sunni and then as a Shiite Muslims, because I used to be in their mosques. I would sit in their cafes, whatever, and I would discuss with them, and I could quote Quran very well. I still have a passive knowledge, not like I used to. And with their mentality, and I understood what they want. We are in a permanent war. That is, we the Muslims are in a permanent war with the non-Muslim world, which is called the world of war. And there can be no peace ever until the whole world becomes Muslim. And who is the greatest force to undermine? And it's called the United States of America in the end. Now, we hear about organizations like CARE, which is basically the Muslim Brotherhood. If you read the stuff in Arabic, what CARE and all these organizations that the State Department and others, including even some people in Republican administrations during the time that I certainly worked in government, it was all, oh, come, let us reason together. When we had a war, after for the Iraq War, and after Iraq actually beforehand invaded Kuwait, we spent a ton of time trying to avoid, we need to define an enemy. And we didn't want to use the word Islamic, and that's again under Republicans. The Democrats are much worse, but they're both bad in this case because they refuse to understand the other side. And I can't tell you the amount of time we wasted on how do we define the war. And the best thing they came up with was GWAT. And we're fighting GWAT, the Global War on Terrorism. Well, that's like saying, I'm going to fight the air. It means nothing. And the other side saw that name and our unwillingness to call things for what they were as a victory on the Islamic, for Islam in its battle to take over the world. They are undermining Europe galore, the Muslim Brotherhood and its allies, Hamas, and in this case, even the Shiite, the Iranian regime, even though most fundamentalism is Sunni, it's not Shiite, but the Shiites, Iran is, of course, supporting them. That's one. And they're doing it to the United States. Most, though not all, of the Islamic institutions in the United States are very, very much planning for the overthrow of the American government. Hello?
Okay, so yeah, sorry, I had a glitch. You're in the hurricane zone, but I had a glitch. So you've raised essentially two kinds of things that we need to be aware of, and I want to hit them both.
Sure.
The first would be what the Iranian people feel about what's going on. And as you say, they hate their government and they're behind the overthrow of their own government. There is something that shockingly to me has received no attention in the United States. And that is that over the last 2 days, the Iranian government has hung 39 people. They have executed 39 people, mostly. So I was going to say, mostly for things having to do with protesting, speaking, signs, things that we would, in our context, like to consider legitimate. Now, is that a way of the Iranian government saying to the people, don't you dare because I can beat you up also? Is that their response to their people? 39 executions?
That is one response. And then they have allies. And you may not like what I'm about to say. The allies are those who say, come, let us reason together and let us sit down and negotiate. Because the Iranian people see that as weakness. You don't negotiate. You eliminate your enemy. Strike Israel. Please strike and get them out. That's how they think. I don't care how we think here.
So from the Iranian people's point of view, separate from the government, the failure of Israel, or the decision of Israel, at least so far, not to retaliate, that's upsetting to the Iranian people because they're looking for Israeli support to help them get rid of their government. Okay,
yes.
So the Iranian government executes a bunch of people. Nobody says anything. The U.S. government, as far as I can tell, has said nothing about those 39 people, including women, which just, it shouldn't matter if they're women or men, but frankly, it does.
Yeah, but men are subhuman today. It's women who are running the things. I mean, that's the way we're heading. Come on.
That's true. And women in Iran seem to be to be out in the front of all of this as well, going outside without their head coverings. But at the same time, you're saying the Iranian people could end up disappointed in Israel and certainly disappointed in the United States if the U.S. keeps pushing for, come, let us reason together, and Israel doesn't take definitive action. So Israel could be hurting its chances with the Iranian people for the future?
I would tell you that whenever Israel or the United States, or maybe Israel alone, takes care of the problem is, to me, not even the nuclear issue. That's problem number two. The number one is the people who have control of the nuclear weapons. That is the government. Get them out of power. We can't know what's going to happen after. America's into the 20th century controlling everything. You can't know what's going to happen afterwards. All I'm saying is the Iranian people, I have no doubt, from a lot of connections all over the place, want one thing. They'd like to rejoin the let's call it the international community of nations, as if there is such a thing, where the way it was under the Shah, which is, oh my God, 40 some odd years ago, the Iranian passport was a very respected passport. I mean, Iranians, if they can manage to travel anywhere, they're suspect everywhere. All they want is to be treated like normal people. And they have a remarkably wonderful, fascinating culture. Before they were taken over by Islam, they were an empire of 1,100 years already by then. When they're taken over by Islam is in the 650s, 660s, where these desert nomads, again an Iranian view, come in, these Arabs with this idiocy called Islam. That's what the Iranians were saying. I am not saying that. I'm just, they're bringing their desert nomads who are lizard eaters, rodent rats, desert rats. This is the Persian phrases to this day for Arabs. They're coming and taking our highly urban, sophisticated culture, and they were. Look at the book of Esther. Long before the time of Jesus, it ruled 127 nations from India to Ethiopia of today. We're great. And who are these people, these heathens coming? And the Iranian people, from my experience in Iran, even those who were religious, they said, we're not really Muslims. We're really Zoroastrians. The Arabs turned us into Muslims. I had devout Muslims tell me, I hate Islam. Now, I know that sounds irrational to us, but this is what I heard in Iran. And I speak Persian, or I spoke Persian pretty well back then. Okay, a little less today.
So this again raises a question. How come the Iranians are supporting Hamas and Hezbollah? And they are Arabs, and Hamas is Sunni, and the Muslim Brotherhood is Sunni. So is this a marriage of convenience for the mullahs? Is this just something to advance a larger agenda?
It's a very important question, Shoshana. Just as from what I was saying culturally, how the Persians understand the Arabs, the best analogy is Arabs are paper towels. Use, throw away, get a new one. And so Hamas and even which is Sunni, of course, and Shiite, Hezbollah, I mean, these are Arabs, so they're subhumans. They're desert rats. They're whatever. That's the Iranian view. Please, it is not my view. Very important. Now, and the other thing is, from, again, yours and my experience, we both know that there were times when the Soviet Union existed, that both the United States and the Soviet Union, the CIA and the KGB, cooperated on certain missions because they each determined that it was in their interest. That's why they cooperated. And that's the same thing with the Shiites versus Sunnis. And believe me, in the long run, besides getting the United States, what the Shiites and the Sunnis, they're real wars among themselves. Since there is no peace as we understand it, no putting bygones be bygones. When historically, when their prophet Muhammad died, there was a battle. Who was going to inherit the mantle of Islam? Who's going to run Islam? The Sunnis, let's call them for short, whatever, the Meccan aristocracy. The Shiites were, Shia is the Hebrew word Sia with a samech, and it means a faction. The faction of the family, of Muhammad's family. Shiites support the real ruler should be Muhammad's family. The Sunnis say, no, it's the Meccan aristocracy. And that battle started, if you wish, in 631, and it can't be solved. It's still being fought today. And America says 631. What the hell is that? It's ancient history. That's how they're understanding it. They hate each other with a passion. Many Sunnis see Shiites as apostates. Apostasy in Islam is punishable by death. So you call someone else, you don't need a trial. You can just kill them. And they make all sorts of arrangements. And I would add maybe one other thing. Let's just say the Saudi-Israel relationships. Israel and Saudi Arabia are, for all intents and purposes, because of common interests, and the same with the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, and a few others, they're all on the same side because the enemy in this case is Iran. But we think all this is, we're all descendant of Abraham. That's how it's a brilliant. That title came up, I think, 2 hours before the actual signing of the Abraham Accords by the then Ambassador David Friedman. It's a brilliant thing. And that sounds like everybody as Abraham, descendant of Abraham, is equal. And we're all descendants of Abraham. How wonderful. No, in the Gulf and all that, they don't call these the Abraham Accords. They call them the Defense Accords because that's how they see it. As the great Ron Dermer, former ambassador and now Minister of Strategic Affairs in Israel, said, if they can't count on the 800-pound gorilla, meaning the United States, to defend them, then the 250-pound gorilla is great. So I personally don't give a damn if they're formal relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia, because what they're doing together is huge. The Saudis know they can't stand up to Iran, and they believe that Israel is prepared to do what's necessary. In America, come, let us reason together. You're going to reason with someone who's holding a knife or a gun at your temple here? It's all It all makes sense in Middle Eastern terms, but not in ours.
So, Secretary of State Blinken and the president, I guess, and Jake Sullivan, they've all talked about a measured response, and they've all talked about defense and offense. And we, the United States government, we have promised to help Israel defend itself. But at the same time that we say we will help them defend themselves, we have offered them no assistance in terms of taking out, or I won't say that, very little assistance in terms of taking out their enemies. So this whole concept of measured response, which the United States is apparently pitching both to Israel and to Iran and to Hezbollah and to Hamas and to anyone else they can find it, it seems to me the only place that they might get a hearing is actually in Israel. The only people who might listen when we say measured response is in Israel. Is that true?
Response is a post-World War term that the Americans and all that, anything to prevent a war. But what is happening in the Middle East is this business of a measured response. As you don't have the guts to do what's necessary to destroy your enemy. That's how they understand it. They therefore see it as weak, and therefore it is a loss for Israel and the United States. I am very aware that there are a lot of senior Israeli leaders who understand exactly what I'm talking about. And I would say one of the things, even within the leaders of the Israeli military establishment who have been very, very much involved in supporting the American view, a proportionate response and all that. Even some of them at the highest levels are now saying this doesn't work. We'll see what happens.
So you see, and I know you are well placed to see this, a change in the Israeli government understanding of the size and scope of the problem, number one. And number two, that goes with that, any change in the American understanding of the size and scope of the problem. And I think what I'm looking for is the potential for the United States and Israel to end up even farther apart than they are today. They are not very close together when it comes to, for example, the Gaza Strip. Israel says the end of the Gaza war will be when Hamas can't govern and can't have military control and can't rebuild. That's the end of the war. The U.S. says, let's have a ceasefire and let's talk about it. Iran, it seems to me, could be one of those issues that drives us even farther apart. Yes?
Sadly. And I would say one other thing. Let's look at the subtleties of a phrase that you constantly hear the American government saying, and in Europe, and how scary this is. And that is, Israel has the right to defend itself. But what are the ramifications? Does Israel has, isn't that nice? How often have we ever heard the phrase, America has a right to defend itself? That sounds absurd. Or the British or the French or the Germans or who knows what else. They have a right to defend themselves. That's a shameful thing. That's a put down. Every people has the right to defend itself. And it is an excuse for it sounding good, but doing nothing. And in fact, hurting Israel. Israel, for the moment, is on its own. There is no compromise with the Blankens. I don't believe Biden is running the country. Whatever. That's just my own personal. I know that's which policy center or whatever. But whoever is running this country, and and that could continue depending on who wins the presidential election here. Whoever is running the country, Israel is nothing more, in my view, than an albatross. The values of the founding fathers of the United States and the values are the values of Mount Sinai, which are Jewish, the values of the Jewish people. They are one. But the people who are making decisions right now and coming up with these awful phrases like you have a right to defend yourself, these people have progressed beyond the values of the founding fathers. And that is dangerous for the long-term survival of the United States of America.
It is indeed, but I would simply take issue with one thing that you said. Yes, they say Israel has the right to defend itself. It's sort of like saying Israel has the right to exist. Nobody in this world has to defend its right to exist except Israel. But the United States has also actually adopted that as U.S. defense policy. If you look at our behavior in the Red Sea and our unwillingness to take on the Houthis, they have attacked numerous American ships. 2 American sailors have been killed. Baruch Hashem, thank you, God, not more than that have been killed. But it's a totally defensive operation. And the understanding is that the commander of CENTCOM, General Eric Kurilla, sent a memo to the Secretary of Defense saying defense alone won't do it. So much as I'm unhappy about what we're telling Israel, sure, you can defend yourself, have Iron Dome, have whatever, that's great. The other half of that is when you defend yourself, all you do is, number one, put off the next attack, and number two, give your enemy time to advance his or its capabilities. But that seems to be our policy as well for us. So it's bigger than just the problem of Israel, excuse me, defending itself. If we take that position, we also have to consider what happens to us in the Pacific, what happens to us in Europe, what happens to us vis-a-vis Russia and Ukraine. All of these things come to us as well as to Israel. And here again, there's no difference between us and Israel, and we ought to believe that, and we ought to work together that way.
Oh, Shoshana, I couldn't agree with you more. And if you watch, and again, I'm not an expert on anything. I'm still learning about the Middle East, but I'm not really an expert on anything else. And all I can say is that I know that America and Israel are being watched like hawks everywhere in the world. Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Vietnam. I could go on and on and on. And I would argue, just if again, it actually supports the Iranians. They know that, as I said, they can't stand up against Israel. The Chinese just published a report in which they say that the Iranian security situation is terrible. And the other thing is, did you hear what Putin said a day or two ago? He's telling
wait. I want to stop you 1 second, because that, again, this received no press in the United States. Repeat what you said about the Chinese and their view of Iran, and then, yes, please go and talk about Putin.
Okay. The Chinese, we have this alliance. Oh, the big alliance: China, Russia, and Iran. And we have all these newspaper reporters who used to report on Fiji or the environment or whatever. Now the so-called instant experts on world politics. And look, what the Chinese government is really thinking, or what Xi Jinping is really thinking, is opaque. We can't know. And that's all that matters in the end. But there is a guy, and it's in the article that you republished, my article, where this is a guy who historically seems to have as a track record of representing where the Iranian government is. I mean, excuse me, where the Chinese government is. And so therefore, that's what we're reduced to, because we have no way whatsoever to know what they are, what is really going on. And it is they, within the last week or so, published this guy who represents, again, I can't remember his name. I do not know Chinese. But it's there's a link to it in my article where he says that Iran's security situation is awful, absolutely awful. And Putin, the great lover of humanity, after what he's done in Ukraine, and bombs going off and missiles going off in hospitals in Ukraine and everything, he is asking the Iranians, yes, do attack Israel, but make sure you don't hit civilians. Putin said, I mean, what world are we living in? This is crazy. And we look at this, that's helpful. That Putin is being helpful. They're making fools of the American government.
So is Putin conceivably, one of the things that Putin has benefited by most in his relationship with Iran is Iranian drones and drone technology that they use in Ukraine. It seems perfectly reasonable to me that Putin would want to constrain Iran, at least to some extent, for fear that Israel will go after certain Iranian assets that Putin wants, like drone factories. And we have 52 questions here in the pot about, is Israel going to blow up Iran's nuclear facilities? I'm not going there, not for the moment. But there's a great many things that Israel could strike in Iran that would be problematic for other countries. The oil terminals at Karg Island, for example, the drone factories, the IRGC headquarters, that would be one of my favorites. Is it possible that Putin's just saying, look, I have equities here, and if you do the wrong thing, Israel is going to make sure that I don't get any more of your drones, and I don't want that. So is Putin really thinking backward, forward? That would be smart.
I am not an expert on Russia. I understand your argument. I would say the following: that we need the world needs, the election people here need lower oil prices. And if Israel takes all this, and please, I'm not an expert on oil, but I know that there are people who can repair these things very quickly. And I would argue one other thing for the future, which is aside from what your comments just now, and that is the Iranian people are extremely savvy and bright. When Iranians get out, they have 2 engineering schools, and 90% of the people who graduate leave Iran and have no problems getting jobs in the United States or Europe. They're grabbed up. They're serious people. And the drone technology, that was a gift actually by 2 presidents ago. You remember that an American drone went over Iran, and our military wanted to take it down, but the president at the time, Barack Obama, refused to let them. Well, all the Iranians did was reverse the technology, and that is the basis of so much of their drones and things like that. It was a gift to Iran. Was it planned that way? I have no idea, but I certainly know what the consequences are, and I'm sure that the government understood that would happen, which is why our military here wanted to take it out, to destroy it to smithereens. Look, Iran has so many unbelievable assets, and most, I would say, is really the brains of their people. Can you imagine if this government is no longer, and these people do join the nations of all, what they have to contribute? And they would be magnificent. Taking out the nuclear things, let me simply address that. Do you care who has nuclear weapons? Or excuse me, do you know, do nuclear weapons kill people, or is it the people who launched them who kill them? We need to get them out. To me, the nuclear program and things like this is secondary, because if we have a new group of people taking over in Iran, anything, I can't imagine it could get worse. If the argument against that was used actually in World War II, there was I can't remember his name, Lord Halifax in Britain was arguing about 6 months before the end of the war with Germany that, oh my God, we need to make a deal with Hitler and we'll deal with the moderate Nazis, because otherwise worse Nazis could come into power than what we have now. This is an argument which there's nothing you can do with this argument. And the argument against going after the regime is we could get worse people. Well, I can only say from my study of Iranian history, which is, again, I've been studying Middle East, and in this case, Iran, since about 18 or 19, and again, I'm 75. And not only studying the history, but thinking about what happened and how it was done and how others reacted, because that's learning how they think. We have a chance of ending the Middle Eastern misery. And it's not only that, because they're doing unbelievable damage in the United States of America, undermining galore. And some even are at the most senior levels in the United States government today. And they're, from what we understand, reporting right back to Tehran. This is absurd. So the idea of, it's again, I totally agree with what your point was just now. Look, you don't, you're just, if you just give a proportional response, you're just setting up trouble for the future. Take your, oh, a person has cancer in his body. I'll take it all out. I'll make the hand clean. Wow, I'm so proud of myself. That's a proportional response. The rest of the body is sick. The body in the Middle East is sick. We need that. America and Israel, because I'm not sure who else would join, but I guarantee you behind the scenes, a lot of Arabs would. And our Saudi allies, and I'm not putting this I'm not being cynical. The Saudi Arabs, the UAE, Bahrain, which would be, thank you for saving us. And so lot of other, sorry.
So this goes this goes to your point of moderate Nazis, and if we don't get rid of them. You made the point earlier, and I wanted to grab it and say it again. The Iranians believe, as you put it, that you negotiate after you win the war. You win, and then you have a negotiation. Interestingly enough, that was the U.S. position in World War II. And it was Israel's position going into the war after October 7th. You defeat them first, and then you figure out what to do with them. We didn't talk about Nazi ideology, uprooting Nazi ideology in the middle of the war. You had to defeat the Nazis first. And the same, and Americans don't pay nearly as much attention to the Japanese side of this as we do to the European side. But the Imperial Japan had been an aggressive, nasty, rotten, terrorist country also for a very long time. After the war, we took over their schools. We wrote their constitution. We wrote the Japanese constitution. And by the way, one of my favorite bits of American trivia, Japanese women got the right to vote in their constitution because an American Jewish woman wrote it in there in the Constitution Writing Committee. She gave an interview. She was like 65 years old. She said she went and did it because she's a patriot. Anyway, we did it. And I think that nobody would say today that the Japanese are the same Japanese that did the rape of Nanking. They are not. And Germans are not the same Germans that they were then. And you have to do the war first. So if you want to figure out how to live with the Palestinians, you finish the war and then you figure it out. So oddly enough, I end up on the same side intellectually as the Iranians who say, finish the war first and then figure out how to live.
Shoshana,
I never thought I'd say that.
Well, you just did, and thank God, because we're on the same team. We see this totally the same. And it's like, oh my God, if Israel were to do this, and there is a hiatus right now before the elections in the United States, that maybe, and I don't know this, maybe Israel feels a little freer to do, to exercise its own whatever. And given the fact that the people of Israel are very, very much behind the idea of solving the problem, ending Hezbollah, ending the Iranian government. And as I said before, and I don't have the details, there are many people, even in the military establishment, who are coming around to that conclusion. You don't want people to die if you don't need this to win. You want to finish it. And how many Japanese or Germans have been killed since the end of World War II? We've saved people's lives.
We not only saved their lives, both countries came out as democratic, prosperous allies of the West. The people didn't die. The people made some money. The people were part of remain part of the international coalition of democratic countries. So if you say you can't uproot an ideology, that's not true. You can.
Well, okay, but Shoshana, to prove again your point, there are many marvelous Muslims who would agree with everything that you and I have said. And they love Islam. And some of them are even religious, whatever. There are ways of reinterpreting the Quran and each of their Shariahs. I say each because the Shiites and the Sunnis do not have the same Sharia. It's completely different legal codes. There are ways of using Islam to reinterpret the sources to get along with the outside world. I'm going to give you one instance. The Quran is very positive about a group of people that in Arabic is called Bani Israel. In Hebrew, that is a direct translation, Bnei Israel, the children of Israel. And it says in the Quran, besides all the garbage things that it says about Jews, it says that the land, the Holy Land, I'm translating in my mind from the Arabic, that the Holy Land belongs to Bani Israel, the children of Israel, and that they have the right to that land. It's there to be used, but it requires people to have the fortitude. And unfortunately, there are many people who understand, by the way, there are people leaving Islam like you can't imagine. That never gets put in the press because the press is so pro-Muslim. There are so many people, I've had it with Islam, but there are those who are very much engaged in reinterpreting the sources, and they have to keep what they say under wraps because the power in Islam today is in the hands of terrorists. And the terrorists will say what that person is saying, the reinterpretation is apostasy. And the punishment for apostasy in Islam is death. You have to admire these Muslims. And it is our job behind the scenes, because if they work with any of us really publicly, they're really endangering themselves. But they are otherwise, what we have to do is eliminate 1.3456 billion, I don't know, Muslims in the world, which is not only impossible, but we have a concept of compassion, and they don't. But there are ways of reinterpreting. Look, the opening line of the Quran is translated into English incorrectly, in the name of God, the merciful and the compassionate. But what it means is we hope God is compassionate to us Muslims, but we humans don't have to be compassionate towards each other. And that explains how when they go at it in wars, what they do to each other is unbelievably brutal, disgusting, murderous. But there are ways of doing this. And again, our job is to try to work with these Muslims behind the scenes. But they know Islam better than we do. I may have some ideas. And believe me, I've worked with all sorts of people, with fascinating people who know Islam much better. And they said, I hadn't thought of this. And and how to do this and that. It is doable. But
okay, so
that's it.
So as you know, because you've done this before, as you know, I normally like to end a program with a positive note. And you've actually just given us an enormously positive note, but I can't end the program yet because I have another question sitting in front of me that needs to go on the table. So hang on to that positive thought for a minute, because I do suspect that you're right, that at the end of the day, if we support the people who are taking the position that they're taking, the brave people who are taking the position they're taking, and we get rid of the people who would kill them if they had the opportunity, we have a chance for something better. But I have a question here, because again, something else that didn't really make the news, and somebody, a listener, has sent this in and wants you to comment on it. Khamenei apparently said something about Hezbollah taking the lead in the response to Israel, the retaliation. And I suppose that's because they have this enormous arsenal in Lebanon and they can do that. Is that a possible sign that they are afraid of Israel, that they don't want to do a direct attack, that they want to hold it back, lay it on the proxy to do it, get it in somebody else's hands? Is that a sign of weakness on their part?
I'm not sure. But let me just say the following. When you hear people talking, that's bravado, braggadocio, I'm going to do this. In the Middle East, people laugh at that because it is really what it means is I'm afraid. Please, somebody protect me, hold me, surround me, that my enemy won't hurt me. That believe me, I'm sure this is what the Iranian verbal response is. But it's understood as also as weakness. I, in an odd way, feel sorry for the Iranian government and for Hezbollah. That's Nasrallah who gives these marvelous speeches. Marvelous in the sense that they're filled with I'm a strong, whatever like this. And we used to have, when we were little, these Popeye cartoons. And at one point you have Popeye, he's got a little kid and he's holding his hand out on the kid's head. And the kid is swinging and swinging and swinging. And the kid can't reach Popeye because Popeye is bigger and all that. All I'm saying, they're the little kids here. Now, by me using that analogy for them is humiliating because I'm saying they're like little kids. I'm just telling you. And there's so many things that we can quietly do to, among other things, let's say we don't, with proportional response, we don't want to hurt the Iranian government. My response is when they have historically disagreed with each other, in this case, it's senior Shiite leaders, grand ayatollahs, they have huge organizations behind them. And let's say that there are people at times, the way they solve problems is death. They kill each other. Surely we could find ways of encouraging them to worry about each other and direct their wrath towards each other. Now, that may sound crazy because what it is to us is this is a religious view of the world. And how are these people thinking? It's based on their war is a Muslim war against the world. But it's a Muslim world against I'm right, you're wrong, go to hell, as the late Bernard Lewis used to say. It's one group saying this to the other. Surely we wouldn't have to go and kill masses of people or even blow up anything. But when I have brought this up, when I used to work for the government here and with Israelis who understand very well in the Israeli government what they're up against, people have said to me, Harold, let me just give the latest because it was an Israeli response. Harold, the idea, these people who are running, for example, the military are basically secular and they have a glass ceiling on people with yarmulkes like I have whatever on my head. They don't let them get any higher, but I suspect that's going to change after this war. But having said that, these people are incapable of understanding that this is a religious war. And they are understanding it in their religious terms. We don't, and Mr. Blanken, who, is, and he and his friends are certainly not thinking, let's say, along religious lines. It's preposterous to us, but they are not Westerners. They don't think like Westerners, and they never will. And the worst people we deal with have perfect American English, because they're the ones who knows how to manipulate us the best. And the Iranians write books.
So we have to circle back now. And because we've come to the end of our time, and also because I need to get back to something a little bit optimistic for our future. It seems to me that at the moment, you've given us a couple of seriously optimistic things to think about. I was thinking about going out on a negative note, but I won't. So
Don't do.
As you look to the future, what is the likelihood, in your view, that we're going to get this right? We are standing on a precipice. There's no question that the world is an edgy point right now, and very bad things can happen. And maybe they will, and maybe they won't. What do you think? Do you go with the optimist side or you go with the pessimist? We need a short answer. Optimist side, pessimist side.
What did Winston Churchill say about America? But I want to make this a much broader thing. America always does the right thing after it has tried every other failed option. That's the old American spirit. But I want to add something different. There was no Israel back then in World War II when Winston Churchill, whatever, said this. Israel is the miner's canary of the world. And the reevaluation of, in other words, the way I've tried to explain a world here, worldview of the Muslim world. Israel is really deeply into this. The young soldiers are very deeply into this. They understand these things. I would say that Israel's going to eventually get it right, whether it wants to or not. And that's the miner's canary being the leader in this case. And I want to tell you that there are many people throughout the world. I don't care what their politicians or their, in many cases, so-called elected leaders. So I say so-called because they have ways of rigging things where you got an election, but whatever. That people are looking and admiring at what Israel is doing. The amount of interest in what Israel is producing, these weapons that it's producing. Now, on the greatness of the Israeli brain, they want to be part of it. This is all over the world. And all I'm saying, that should be, that is the God willing, it will be Israel, followed by everybody else, and its superpower. I don't want to say older brother, because older brothers think they can tell the little brother what to do. But the greatness of America is that we have within us in this country the ability to march on and do wonderful things. And there are some leaders in the United States who get this and admire the principles of the founding fathers, as I said before, which are the principles of Mount Sinai in Israel. And that means we work together, and we can. And I can tell you from an Israeli point of view, and this I'm 100% sure, the Israelis would like nothing better to be able to work with an American government that believes in the founders' principles, because then America represents hope, which is the greatest thing that a human being can have.
And that is where I'm going to stop you, because that is a great statement of positive principle and hope for our future. And I want to thank everyone who joined us today for being here. And Harold Rhode, thank you for an enlightening hour. We learned a lot. You gave us a lot to think about. We're all going to go home and think now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shoshana. Thank you for the marvelous work that you're doing. And may the forces of goodness and hope win.